On the 23rd of September 1944, in the small village of Langres in eastern France, the morning fog clung to the rolling hills like a protective blanket. Marie Dubois, a 20-year-old pharmacy apprentice, cycled through the deserted streets as German forces retreated and American troops advanced toward the region. She believed, like many in her village, that liberation meant safety had finally arrived after 4 long years of occupation. She could not have imagined that a single act of compassion that afternoon would alter the course of her life for decades to come. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the story of how ordinary people, caught in the machinery of global conflict, can forge connections that transcend borders and generations, revealing how the smallest acts of humanity can echo across time with consequences no one could foresee. The autumn of 1944 brought cautious optimism to Langres. The ancient walled town, perched defensively on a limestone plateau, had survived centuries of conflicts due to its strategic location. During the recent occupation, the town had suffered, but less severely than many other French communities. The German commander assigned to the region, Colonel Werner Hoffmann, had enforced order without the extreme brutality seen elsewhere. This relative restraint had not made the Germans welcome, but it had preserved the town's historic buildings and spared most families from the worst horrors of the war. Marie lived with her grandmother, Elise, in a stone cottage near the old pharmacy where she had worked since her father was taken to Germany as forced labor in 1942. Her mother had passed away from pneumonia years before the war, and her older brother Henri had joined the resistance in early 1943, disappearing into the forests of eastern France. The last letter from him had arrived 6 months ago, smuggled by a cheese merchant passing through town. "Working at the pharmacy has been my salvation," Marie confided to her diary that morning. "Monsieur Bouchard teaches me something new each day, and we help everyone regardless of their politics. Yesterday we dispensed medicine for the mayor's wife, who collaborates openly with the Germans, and an hour later secretly prepared antiseptics for someone in the resistance. Monsieur says medicine must remain neutral in war. Illness and injury do not discriminate, so neither should healers." The bells of Saint Mamès Cathedral tolled 8 as Marie unlocked the pharmacy door. Monsieur Bouchard, a man in his 60s with wispy white hair and glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, was already measuring powders at the back counter. "Good morning, Marie," he said without looking up. "We received word that American medical units are approaching from the southwest. We should prepare additional supplies." "Americans, not French forces?" Marie asked, hanging her coat on a wooden peg. "The French 2nd Armored Division is focused on Paris and points north. It seems we will be liberated by the Americans." He finally looked up, his expression serious. "This means we must be ready for casualties. War does not end cleanly, even in victory." Throughout the morning, Marie organized bandages, antiseptics, and the dwindling supply of medications. The pharmacy had been operating with severe shortages for over a year. Simple items like aspirin were reserved for the most serious cases, and many prescriptions were filled with herb-based substitutes that Monsieur Bouchard prepared according to old formulas rarely used before the war. At midday, distant rumbling echoed through the stone buildings. Marie stepped outside and saw several neighbors already in the street, looking toward the western road. "Artillery," said Monsieur Perrault, the baker, "moving this way." "The Americans?" asked his wife hopefully. "Or Germans retreating," cautioned Elise Dubois, who had come to bring Marie a modest lunch of bread and cheese. "Either way, we should not celebrate prematurely." Marie's grandmother had lived through the previous war and maintained a pragmatic outlook that some mistook for pessimism. "History has taught me that armies bring trouble, whether they come as conquerors or liberators," she often said. By mid-afternoon, military vehicles bearing white stars began arriving at the edge of town. First came the reconnaissance units in lightweight jeeps, followed by medical transport trucks. A temporary aid station was established in the town square, and within an hour, wounded men were being unloaded and assessed. "Marie," Monsieur Bouchard called urgently from the pharmacy doorway. "A Captain Williams is requesting all available medical supplies. Can you deliver what we've prepared and see what else they need?" Marie loaded the precious supplies into her bicycle basket and pedaled to the square. The scene was controlled chaos, medical personnel in blood-stained uniforms moving efficiently among rows of wounded men laid out on stretchers. Some injuries appeared recent, others were clearly several days old and showing signs of infection. Captain Robert Williams, a tall man with exhausted eyes and 3 days of stubble, barely glanced at the supplies Marie brought. "Thank you, miss. Please tell your pharmacist we need more antiseptic solution and all the sulfur powder he can spare," he said in accented French. "I am the apprentice pharmacist," Marie replied in careful English, surprising the captain. "I studied English in school. My father insisted, saying it would be useful someday." Williams managed a tired smile. "Your father was right. We've been advancing faster than our supply lines can keep up. Any help is appreciated." As Marie turned to leave, a commotion at the edge of the square caught her attention. A jeep had arrived, carrying a single severely injured soldier. The medical attendants rushed to transfer him to a treatment area, but their urgent expressions told Marie this was a critical case. "Lieutenant Gardner," she heard someone say, "found in a farmhouse 10 miles east. Locals hid him after his plane went down 3 days ago." Marie approached, drawn by a sense that her help might be needed. The wounded airman was conscious but clearly suffering. His flight jacket had been cut away, revealing a makeshift bandage around his torso now soaked with blood. Despite his condition, he was trying to communicate something important to the medics attending him. "Map? In my boot," he managed to say. "Enemy positions." A medic carefully removed a folded, blood-stained paper from inside the lieutenant's boot and handed it to an intelligence officer standing nearby. Only then did the injured man relax slightly, his mission accomplished. Captain Williams appeared at Marie's side. "He's been gathering intelligence behind enemy lines. Brave man. Probably saved a lot of lives." He shook his head. "But we're short on plasma, and he's lost a lot of blood." Marie made a quick decision. "I'll donate. My blood type is O, universal donor, yes?" The captain looked at her with newfound respect. "Yes, that's right. Are you sure?" "Of course." Marie rolled up her sleeve. "My brother is somewhere out there too. I hope someone would do the same for him." Within minutes, Marie was seated beside Lieutenant Daniel Gardner as a medic prepared the transfusion equipment. Looking at him properly for the first time, Marie was struck by how young he appeared. Perhaps 25, with sandy hair and a face that, despite the pain, suggested a person accustomed to smiling. His blue eyes found hers as the needle was inserted into her arm. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice weak but clear. "You're welcome, Lieutenant Gardner," she replied. "I am Marie Dubois." "Daniel," he corrected. "Just Daniel now." While the transfusion proceeded, Marie learned that Daniel was from Connecticut, had been a university student studying architecture before the war, and had joined the Air Force in 1942. His B-17 bomber had been shot down during a mission to target railway infrastructure. He was the only survivor of his 10-man crew. "They never saw the fighter that got us," he explained, wincing as a medic checked his wounds. "Came out of the sun. I bailed out over the forest, but my chute caught in the trees, broke some ribs in the landing. Local farmers found me and kept me hidden." "You were lucky," Marie observed. "Lucky would have been making it back to England with my crew," he replied, a shadow crossing his face. "But yes, I'm grateful to be alive." As the blood flowed from her veins to his, Marie felt a peculiar connection forming. Perhaps it was the intimacy of the moment, or the strangeness of giving part of herself to this foreigner who had fallen from the sky into her country. Whatever the reason, she found herself sharing details of her own life. Her father in Germany, her brother with the resistance, her studies interrupted by war, and her dreams of becoming a proper pharmacist someday. "You will," Daniel assured her with unexpected conviction. "When this is over, the world will need builders and healers more than soldiers." The transfusion complete, Captain Williams insisted Marie rest before returning to the pharmacy. "Your blood may have saved his life," he told her. "I won't forget this." Neither would Marie. Though she didn't know it then, the face of the wounded American would remain clear in her memory long after many other details of the war had faded. Over the next 2 days, Marie divided her time between the pharmacy and the aid station, bringing supplies and helping where her knowledge of both languages proved useful. Lieutenant Gardner remained in Langres, as the more seriously wounded were deemed too fragile to transport immediately. Each day, Marie checked on his progress, bringing broth from her grandmother's kitchen and changing his bandages when the medical staff were occupied with new arrivals. On the 3rd day, as she adjusted his pillows, Daniel caught her hand. "Why are you being so kind to me?" he asked. "I'm just another soldier passing through your town." Marie considered the question seriously. "Perhaps because helping you feels like doing something meaningful in a time when so much is senseless. Or perhaps," she hesitated, "perhaps because when I look at you I see someone who might have been a friend in another time, another place." He smiled at that. "I'd like to think so." That evening, Marie made a small package containing a notebook, pencil, and a bar of precious lavender soap that had been hidden away since before the war. She added a note with her address, then delivered it to Daniel before returning home. "Something to pass the time," she explained as he unwrapped it, "and to remember that not everything in France smells of war." He held the soap to his nose and closed his eyes. "I'll never smell lavender without thinking of you," he promised. The following morning, Marie arrived at the aid station to find preparations underway to evacuate all patients to a larger hospital facility in Dijon. Lieutenant Gardner would be leaving within the hour. "I wanted to give you this," he said when she came to say goodbye, handing her a carefully folded paper. It was a skillful sketch of Marie herself, drawn in pencil on a page from the notebook she had given him. In the drawing, she was standing by a window, light illuminating half her face, a gentle smile playing on her lips. "It's how I'll remember you," Daniel said. "Not just the girl who gave her blood, but someone who brought light into a dark time." Marie carefully placed the drawing in her coat pocket. "Will you write when you're back in America?" she asked, surprising herself with the request. "I promise," he replied without hesitation. As the ambulances prepared to depart, Captain Williams approached Marie with a small wooden box. "Lieutenant Gardner asked me to give you this," he said. "Medical supplies from our personal kits. Not much, but better than nothing." He lowered his voice. "There's also some chocolate and coffee hidden at the bottom. Don't tell anyone I knew about that." Marie thanked him, watching as Daniel was loaded into an ambulance. Their eyes met one last time before the doors closed. She raised her hand in farewell, and then he was gone. Life in Langres gradually returned to a different kind of normal as the front moved eastward. The German occupation was over, but the war's effects lingered in food shortages, disrupted communications, and the continued absence of loved ones. Marie received a letter from her father in December, his first communication since being taken to Germany. He was alive but frail, working in a factory near Hamburg. Her brother Henri remained missing. In January of 1945, a package arrived from England containing real tea, chocolate, and a letter from Daniel. He had recovered sufficiently to return to limited duty, though his combat days were over. He wrote of his life on the airbase, his plans to complete his education after the war, and his memories of Langres. The letter ended with a question. "Would it be improper to continue writing to you, Marie? Your kindness has stayed with me, a bright spot in this terrible time." Marie replied immediately, and thus began a correspondence that would last through the remainder of the war. Their letters, crossing the English Channel in military postbags, created a private world where two young people could share thoughts and dreams, despite the chaos surrounding them. Daniel told Marie about his childhood in New England, his parents' small architectural firm, and his younger sister Eliza, who was studying nursing. Marie wrote about her ambitions to modernize the old pharmacy someday, her love of French literature, and stories of village life under occupation that she hadn't felt free to share while Daniel was in Langres. In April, as Allied forces pushed into Germany, Daniel wrote, "Sometimes I wonder if we would have met if not for this war. Our paths would never have crossed. Is it terrible to think that something good could come from something so horrible? That amid all this suffering and death, connections are still being made?" Marie understood exactly what he meant. She had been having similar thoughts. "Perhaps this is how humanity survives such darkness," she wrote back, "by finding unexpected light." On the 8th of May, 1945, Marie stood in the town square with her grandmother and the entire population of Langres as the mayor announced Germany's unconditional surrender. Church bells rang out across France, and people embraced strangers in the street. The war in Europe was over. That night, Marie wrote to Daniel, "Today we celebrated, but the joy is complex. So many empty places at family tables, so much rebuilding ahead. My father will return soon, we hope, but there is still no word of Henri. In your next letter, tell me again about Connecticut. I need to imagine peaceful places now." 2 weeks later, Marie's father returned to Langres, transported by American military vehicles, along with other former forced laborers. Jacques Dubois was gaunt, his hair completely grey despite being only 47, but alive and determined to recover. Seeing her father walking slowly toward their cottage, supported by a young American corporal, Marie felt a surge of gratitude that threatened to overwhelm her. "Your father is a fighter," the corporal told her, "kept up the spirits of the older men during the journey home. You should be proud." As spring turned to summer, Marie continued writing to Daniel, who had been transferred back to England and was awaiting transport to America. His letters spoke increasingly of the future, his plans to finish his degree, join his father's architectural practice, and help rebuild a world at peace. Reading between the lines, Marie sensed an unasked question taking shape. In late June, his longest letter yet arrived. "My dearest Marie, I will be returning to America next month. Before I leave Europe, I must ask what I've been afraid to put into words until now. Would you consider a future in America? I know it's an enormous thing to suggest leaving your home, your family, everything familiar. Perhaps it's selfish of me to ask, but I cannot imagine my life going forward without you in it. The connection we've formed through these letters has become the most important thing in my life. I love you, Marie Dubois, and I want to marry you if you'll have me." Marie read the letter multiple times, her heart racing. She had known this moment might come, had perhaps even hoped for it, but now faced with the reality of the decision, she felt torn. How could she leave France when her family needed her? Her father was still recovering, the pharmacy depended on her, and what of Henri still missing? If he returned, would he find his sister gone to America? She confided in her grandmother, who listened without interruption as Marie explained her dilemma. "Love in wartime is complicated," Elise said finally. "It burns brighter, faster. Sometimes it lasts, sometimes it fades when normal life returns." She took Marie's hands in her own. "But I see something genuine in your eyes when you speak of him, something beyond the romance of unusual circumstances." "What should I do, Grand-Mère?" Marie asked. "I cannot tell you that. But ask yourself this. 20 years from now, which choice would you regret more, going or staying?" That night, Marie sat at her small desk and wrote 2 letters. The first was to Daniel. "My dear Daniel, your letter has filled me with both joy and conflict. I cannot deny my feelings for you have grown beyond friendship, but my duty to my family and my country is a powerful force pulling me in the opposite direction. France is broken, in need of healing and rebuilding. My father is still weak, the pharmacy understaffed, and my brother missing. How can I leave now? Yet the thought of never seeing you again creates an emptiness I cannot bear to contemplate." The second letter was to Captain Williams, now Major Williams, whose address Daniel had shared. She asked if there was any way to search military records for information about her brother, Henri Dubois, last known to be operating with resistance fighters near the German border. 2 weeks later, as Marie was helping her father in their small garden behind the cottage, a military jeep stopped on the street outside. A uniformed officer approached, asking for Mademoiselle Dubois. "I'm Major Robert Williams, Quim," he said when Marie identified herself. "We met during the liberation of Langres." Marie remembered him immediately, the exhausted doctor who had accepted her blood donation for Daniel. "Of course, Major. What brings you back to our town?" "Your letter, actually. I've been helping coordinate repatriation efforts, and when I received your inquiry about your brother, I recognized your name." He glanced at Jacques Dubois, who had set down his gardening tools and was watching them curiously. "Perhaps we could speak privately." Marie's heart sank. In her experience, requests for privacy usually preceded bad news. She led the Major into the cottage, her father following slowly behind. Inside, Williams removed his cap and spoke directly to both Dubois. "I believe we've located your son, sir. Henri Dubois was recovered from a field hospital near Strasbourg 3 weeks ago. He was operating under an alias with the resistance, which is why he wasn't identified sooner." Marie gasped. "He's alive? Henri is alive?" The Major's expression remained carefully neutral. "Yes, but I should prepare you. He was seriously injured during fighting in the Vosges Mountains in March. He's lost his left arm above the elbow and has been recovering from other injuries as well. He's stable now, but weak." Jacques Dubois sank heavily into a chair. "My son, when can we see him?" "That's why I'm here, sir. I can arrange transport for you both to the hospital in Paris where he's being treated. He should be well enough to return home within another month." Marie embraced her father, both of them overwhelmed with emotion, joy that Henri lived, grief for his suffering, relief that their family would be whole again. Through her tears, she looked at Major Williams. "Thank you. We had almost lost hope." "Don't thank me," Williams replied. "Lieutenant Gardner is the one who wouldn't give up. When he saw your letter asking about your brother, he pulled every string he could find, called in favors, and personally reviewed hundreds of records of unidentified resistance fighters in military hospitals. He's a determined man when he cares about something." He paused meaningfully. "Or someone." Later that night, after arrangements had been made for their journey to Paris the following day, Marie sat down to write again to Daniel. This time her words flowed without hesitation. "My dearest Daniel, today everything has changed. Through your efforts, my brother has been found alive. I cannot express what this means to my family, to me. You have given us back our Henri, and in doing so you've shown me with absolute clarity what kind of man you are. I realize now that love is not measured by proximity but by actions. You have acted with love not just toward me, but toward those I hold dear, though you've never met them. In answering your question, yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will come to America. Not immediately, for Henri will need time to recover, and I must help my father restore our home and lives. But by spring, if you can wait that long, I will join you in Connecticut. The pharmacy has already received applications from 2 qualified pharmacists returning from military service, and Monsieur Bouchard believes either would be suitable to take my place. My father, when I spoke with him tonight, said something that surprised me. He said, 'Marie, your mother and I raised you to have wings, not roots. Use them.' So I will come to you, bringing all my love and hopes for our future together. Until then, I remain forever yours, Marie." As she sealed the envelope, Marie glanced at the sketch Daniel had drawn of her, now framed on her bedroom wall. In the soft lamplight, the pencil lines seemed to shimmer with possibility. She thought of the blood she had given him that autumn day, flowing from her veins to his, and how it had forged a connection neither could have foreseen. Outside her window, the summer night was alive with the sounds of a town slowly returning to life after the long darkness of war, distant music, laughter, the church bells marking the hour. Langres had endured as it had for centuries, and now Marie Dubois would carry a piece of it across the ocean to begin a new chapter of her life with the American soldier who had fallen from the sky into her heart. The future stretched before her, uncertain but full of promise. As she prepared for sleep, Marie whispered a prayer of gratitude for unexpected blessings found amid terrible times, for connections made across boundaries of nation and language, and for the strange winding paths that love sometimes takes to find its way home. For now, though, there was tomorrow to think about, the journey to Paris, the reunion with Henri, and all the preparations that would follow. One step at a time, she told herself. The war had taught her, if nothing else, to focus on today while holding gently to hope for tomorrow. The spring of 1946 arrived with gentle rains washing away the last visible scars of war from the landscape around Langres. For Marie Dubois, now 21, the past year had been a whirlwind of emotion and change. Henri had returned home in September, adjusting slowly to life with one arm, but displaying the same quiet determination that had made him an effective resistance fighter. Jacques Dubois had regained much of his strength, though his experiences in Germany had left him with a persistent cough that worried Marie. The pharmacy continued to operate under Monsieur Bouchard's guidance, with Marie and a newly hired pharmacist named Paul Mercier sharing the workload. Paul was a soft-spoken man of 30 who had served as a medical officer before being captured at Dunkirk in 1940. His 4 years in a prisoner of war camp had left him with a philosophical outlook on life that Marie found refreshing amid the often bitter post-war recriminations dividing French society. "I've spent enough time hating," Paul told her one quiet afternoon as they reorganized supplies that were finally becoming more readily available. "Now I just want to help people heal." Throughout these months of transition, letters continued to arrive from Connecticut, where Daniel Gardner had resumed his studies in architecture. His words painted pictures of peaceful streets lined with elm trees, a family home with a wide front porch, and parents who were eager to welcome Marie into their lives. Each letter reinforced her decision to join him, even as preparations for her departure stirred complex emotions. "I feel like I'm living between two worlds," Marie confided to her grandmother as they sorted through her belongings, deciding what to take to America. "Half of me is already there with Daniel, while the other half cannot imagine leaving Langres." "That feeling may never entirely disappear," Elise replied, carefully folding a lace tablecloth she was insisting Marie take. "Your mother felt similarly when she married your father and moved here from Lyon. It wasn't nearly so far, yet she spoke of the same divided heart." "Did she ever regret it?" Marie asked. "Not regret, no. But there were days of homesickness, especially after you children were born. She wished her own mother could see her grandchildren more often." The older woman smoothed the tablecloth with weathered hands. "Life is full of such compromises, Marie. The question is whether what you gain is worth what you leave behind." For Marie, the answer remained yes, especially after the official letter arrived confirming her status as a war bride, eligible for transport to America under the War Brides Act. Her passage was booked for April 15th, 1946, on a converted military transport ship sailing from Le Havre to New York. As the date approached, Marie's anxiety grew. Not about her decision, her love for Daniel remained certain, but about the journey itself and the new life awaiting her. Would his family truly accept her? Would her English be sufficient? Could she find work as a pharmacist in America, or would all her training be wasted? Daniel addressed these fears in his letters with characteristic thoughtfulness. "My parents are preparing the guest room as your own space until the wedding. Mother has contacted several French families in town who are eager to welcome you. Father has spoken with the owner of Wilson's Pharmacy on Main Street, who is interested in meeting you. Your knowledge of European pharmaceutical practices could be valuable to him. As for your English, from your letters, I can tell you have nothing to worry about." The night before her departure, the Dubois family gathered for a farewell dinner. Monsieur Bouchard joined them, as did several neighbors who had become like family during the hardest days of the war. The mood was bittersweet, celebration mixed with the knowledge that such gatherings would be rare in the future. After the guests had gone, Henri presented Marie with a small wooden box. "I've been working on this when you weren't looking," he said. Inside lay a beautifully carved miniature of the Langres Cathedral, detailed down to the tiny saints in their niches. To remember home, Marie embraced her brother, careful of his still tender left side. "As if I could forget." Her father gave her his pocket watch, her mother's wedding ring which had been kept safe throughout the occupation, and a leather-bound volume of French poetry. "For when you miss the sound of your language," Amadi explained. From her grandmother came the most practical gift, a thick envelope. "Letters I've written to you," Elise explained. "One for each month of your first year in America. Open them when you need to hear my voice." Dawn broke clear and cool on April 15th. The family accompanied Marie to the train station in Dijon, where she would begin the first leg of her journey to Le Havre. Final embraces were exchanged on the platform, words of love spoken through tears. As the train pulled away, Marie watched her family grow smaller until they disappeared around a bend. She pressed her hand against the window, already feeling the distance stretching between them. Then she opened her handbag and removed Daniel's most recent letter, reading his words of welcome and love to strengthen her resolve for the journey ahead. The crossing took 9 days aboard the USS Willard Victory, a cargo vessel hastily converted to transport war brides. Marie shared a cramped cabin with 3 other women, an English nurse married to a doctor from Boston, a Belgian woman joining her husband in Chicago, and a German woman whose marriage to an American officer had raised eyebrows but was nonetheless legally recognized. Despite their diverse backgrounds, the women formed a tight bond, united by their shared experience of loving men from a country most had never seen. They spent hours on deck when weather permitted, pointing out seabirds and distant ships, sharing photographs and stories of their fiancés and husbands, and speculating about American life based on films they had seen and letters they had received. "My Harold says everyone has an automobile in America," declared Edith, the English nurse. "And refrigerators in every home," added Margot from Belgium. "Can you imagine? No daily shopping for ice." Greta, the German woman, remained quieter, still cautious about her reception, both on the ship and in her future home. One evening, as she and Marie stood at the rail watching the sunset, she confessed her fears. "They will hate me in America, the German war bride. They will think I was a Nazi." Marie considered before responding. "People often fear what they don't understand. My Daniel says Americans are generally welcoming but can be provincial in their thinking. We must be patient teachers." "You are kind to say we," Greta smiled sadly. "But your experience will be different. France was an ally, Germany was also filled with ordinary people caught in terrible circumstances," Marie finished. "My father was held in Hamburg. He told me of a German woman who secretly brought extra bread to the workers when she could, at great personal risk. Humanity exists everywhere, even in the darkest times." By the time the Statue of Liberty appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the morning sky on April 24th, the 4 women had promised to write to each other regularly. They stood together on deck, gripping the rail with white knuckles as the massive harbor of New York came into view. "It's so much bigger than I imagined," whispered Edith, voicing what they were all thinking. The processing at Ellis Island was overwhelming. Long lines, medical examinations, document checks, and seemingly endless questions from immigration officials. By late afternoon, exhausted and disoriented, Marie found herself sitting on a bench in the main hall, waiting for her name to be called for the final clearance. And then, through the crowd, she saw him. Daniel stood near the exit doors, scanning the faces of arriving women. He was thinner than she remembered, but stood straight and tall, no longer the wounded soldier she had tended. When his eyes found hers, his entire face transformed with joy. Marie was on her feet instantly, weaving through families and officials until she stood before him, suddenly shy despite all the letters they had exchanged. "Hello, Daniel," she managed to say. Instead of speaking, he gathered her into his arms, holding her as if afraid she might disappear. When he finally released her, his eyes were wet. "You're here," he said simply. "You're really here." The train journey to Connecticut passed in a blur of new sights and private conversations. Daniel pointed out landmarks along the way, but mostly they talked, discovering the rhythms of each other's speech, the expressions that animated their faces, all the small details that letters could not convey. "Are you disappointed?" Marie asked suddenly as they watched the New England countryside roll past. "Now that you see me in person again?" Daniel looked surprised. "Disappointed?" "Marie, you are exactly as I remembered, only more so. More real. More." He searched for the right word. "More vibrant." She smiled, relieved. "I was afraid perhaps your memories had made me something more than I am." "My memories could never do you justice," he said, taking her hand. "I'm only grateful you took the risk of coming so far based on letters and one brief meeting." "Not so brief," she reminded him. "How you had my blood in your veins before you even knew my name." He laughed at that, the sound warming her heart. "True enough. Perhaps that's why I felt connected to you from the beginning." The Gardner family home in Hartford was a white colonial with black shutters, set back from the street behind a neatly trimmed lawn. Daniel's parents and younger sister waited on the porch steps as the taxi pulled into the driveway. Marie felt a flutter of nervousness as Daniel helped her from the car. Elizabeth Gardner moved forward first, a tall woman with Daniel's blue eyes and an expression of careful welcome. "Marie," she said, extending her hands, We've waited so long to meet you." Richard Gardner, an architect like his son would become, was more effusive, embracing Marie with genuine warmth. "Welcome to America, my dear, and to our family." Daniel's sister Eliza, now a registered nurse, presented Marie with a small bouquet of spring flowers. "From our garden," she explained. "I thought you might like something fresh after your journey." That first evening in Connecticut established a pattern that would carry through the weeks leading up to the wedding. The Gardners were unfailingly kind, making efforts to include Marie in family conversations and explaining American customs that confused her. Yet there remained a subtle reserve, an unspoken awareness of her foreignness that made Marie acutely conscious of every French inflection in her speech, every cultural misunderstanding. "They're trying," Daniel assured her after one awkward dinner where Marie had been bewildered by the family's discussion of American baseball. "Remember, they've never traveled outside the country. Your experiences are as foreign to them as baseball is to you." "I know," Marie sighed. "I just wish I could make them understand that I'm still the same person, whether discussing pharmacy compounds or attempting to understand why grown men chasing a ball around a field is so fascinating." Daniel laughed and kissed her forehead. "Give it time. They already love you because I love you. The rest will come." The wedding took place on June 8, 1946, in the garden behind the Gardner home. Marie wore a simple white dress that Eliza had helped her find, with a crown of flowers in her hair rather than a veil. Her bouquet contained lavender, a small reminder of home and their first meaningful exchange. Only 50 guests attended, the Gardner family's close friends and colleagues, but Marie felt the absence of her family keenly as she walked alone toward Daniel. He must have read the emotion in her eyes because he stepped forward to meet her halfway down the makeshift aisle, taking her hands in his. "Together," he said quietly. "From now on, we walk together." The minister, a friend of the family who had made an effort to include some French phrases in the ceremony, pronounced them husband and wife as the afternoon sun filtered through the elm trees. When Daniel kissed her, Marie felt a sense of completion. The journey that had begun with an act of compassion during war had led to this moment of promise in peace. The early years of their marriage unfolded in a pattern common to that optimistic post-war era. Daniel completed his architecture degree and joined his father's firm. Marie secured a position at Wilson's Pharmacy, where her European training was indeed valued, particularly her knowledge of herb-based alternatives developed during wartime shortages. They rented a small apartment near downtown Hartford, saving for a house of their own. Letters arrived regularly from France, updates from her father and brother, advice from her grandmother, news of village life from Monsieur Bouchard. Marie responded diligently, sending photographs of her new life, descriptions of American customs, and increasingly, as the months passed, stories of her adaptation and growing contentment. In her first letter after the wedding, she had written to her grandmother, "America is both exactly and nothing like I imagined. The abundance is staggering, shelves full of goods, fresh fruit regardless of season, gasoline without restriction. Yet beneath this plenty, I sense a nation also healing from war, families missing those who didn't return, young men trying to resume interrupted lives. In this, at least, human experience seems universal." By 1948, Marie had mastered the peculiarities of American pharmacy practices and was trusted enough to manage the store when Mr. Wilson took his annual fishing vacation. Daniel had designed his first independent building, a small public library in a neighboring town, to considerable local acclaim. They had moved into a modest house on a quiet street lined with maple trees, close enough to the center of town that Marie could walk to work. That December, Marie received news that her grandmother had passed away peacefully in her sleep. The loss hit her harder than expected, bringing waves of homesickness and regret that she had not seen Elise one last time. Daniel found her sitting on their bed surrounded by the 12 letters her grandmother had given her, now all opened and read multiple times. "I should have gone back to visit," Marie said, wiping tears. "I kept thinking there would be time later." Daniel sat beside her, placing an arm around her shoulders. "We'll go as soon as we can arrange it," he promised. "You can show me Langres through your eyes." But that trip would be delayed by the arrival of their first child, Thomas Richard Dubois Gardner, born in October 1949. Marie had insisted on including her family name, maintaining a connection to her French heritage. 2 years later, Eleanor Marie joined the family, completing what appeared to be a perfect picture of post-war American prosperity and domestic happiness. Yet beneath the surface of this successful life, Marie occasionally felt a persistent dislocation, not quite unhappiness but a sense of existing between worlds. Her accent, though softened by years in America, still marked her as different. Cultural references sometimes flew past her. Holidays like Thanksgiving never quite felt natural, while traditional French celebrations went largely unobserved. "I am neither fully French nor truly American," she confided to her journal on the 10th anniversary of her arrival. Perhaps this is the immigrant's eternal condition, to build a life in one place while carrying another place in your heart. Daniel understood these feelings better than most. His own war experiences had left him similarly displaced, physically present in peaceful Connecticut, but mentally returning often to the skies over Europe, to the farmhouse where he had hidden from German patrols, to the aid station where a young Frenchwoman had given him her blood. They rarely spoke directly of the war. Like many of their generation, they preferred focusing on building the future rather than revisiting the past. But the connection forged in that extraordinary time remained a foundation of their relationship, an unspoken understanding that they had both been shaped by experiences their neighbors, colleagues, and even family could never fully comprehend. Their children grew up hearing carefully edited stories of how their parents met, a sanitized version emphasizing romance rather than wounds and war. As teenagers in the 1960s, Thomas and Eleanor began asking more probing questions, influenced by the anti-war sentiment surrounding Vietnam and their own developing political consciousness. "Were you afraid when you were shot down?" 16-year-old Thomas asked his father one evening as the family watched news coverage of American bombers over Hanoi. Daniel considered the question seriously. Yes, terrified, but also strangely calm in moments, as if part of me was watching from outside myself. "And you, Mum?" Eleanor turned to Marie. "Were you afraid during the occupation?" "Every day," Marie answered honestly. "Fear becomes a companion, always present but eventually familiar enough to function around." "Then how can you support this war?" Thomas demanded, gesturing toward the television, knowing what it really means. Daniel and Marie exchanged glances. Their son's question deserved a thoughtful response. "We don't support war," Marie said finally. "We support the individuals caught in it, on all sides, like the farmer who hid your father at risk to his own family, like the German nurse I worked alongside after liberation, who treated everyone regardless of uniform." "The politics is complicated," Daniel added. "The humanity isn't. Remember that distinction." As the children grew and eventually left for college, Thomas to study international relations at Georgetown, Eleanor to pursue medicine at Johns Hopkins, Marie found herself drawn back to her French roots. She began cooking more traditional French dishes, subscribed to French newspapers, and joined a Francophone cultural group that met monthly in Hartford. In 1972, 26 years after leaving France, Marie and Daniel finally made the journey back to Langres. Her father had passed away 5 years earlier, but Henri still lived in the family cottage, now with a wife and 2 teenage sons. The village had changed less than Marie had expected. The same ancient walls still encircled the town centre. The same cathedral bells marked the hours. Walking the familiar streets with Daniel at her side created a strange doubling in Marie's mind. Past and present overlapping, the young pharmacy apprentice and the middle-aged American pharmacist occupying the same space across decades. "It's smaller than I remembered," she remarked as they stood in the town square where the aid station had once been established. "But exactly as beautiful as you described," Daniel replied, squeezing her hand. They visited her father's grave, toured the pharmacy where Monsieur Bouchard, now in his 90s but still sharp-minded, proudly showed off the modernizations Marie had once dreamed of implementing herself. They dined with Henri and his family, sharing photographs of Thomas and Eleanor, comparing notes on raising children in such different environments. On their final evening in Langres, Henri presented Marie with a box of letters. "I found these when clearing Father's desk after he died," he explained. He kept every letter you sent from America. I thought you might want them." Later, in the small hotel room, Marie read through her own words, chronicling her journey from war bride to established American, seeing her gradual transformation reflected in changing handwriting, evolving concerns and shifting perspectives. The letters revealed a woman slowly finding her place in a new world while carrying the old one within her. "I hardly recognize the girl who wrote the earliest ones," she told Daniel. "So uncertain, so eager to please, so homesick." "And now?" he asked, sitting beside her on the bed. "Now I understand that home isn't just a place," she said thoughtfully. "It's the connections we make, the lives we touch." She rested her head on his shoulder. "You have been my home since the day we met, regardless of geography." The visit to France seemed to settle something in Marie. Upon returning to Connecticut, she approached her American life with renewed appreciation while maintaining her French identity more confidently. She began teaching French cooking classes at the community center, compiled her wartime memories into a manuscript she had no intention of publishing, but felt compelled to record for her grandchildren, and spoke more openly about her experiences during the occupation. Life continued its forward march. Daniel retired from the architecture firm in 1983, though he continued to consult on special projects. Marie reduced her hours at the pharmacy, but remained involved in training younger staff. They welcomed grandchildren, traveled extensively through Europe and America, and settled into the comfortable rhythms of a long, successful marriage. Then came 1994. Marie, now 70 years old, had been widowed for 3 years. Daniel had suffered a sudden heart attack while working in his garden, leaving her alone in the home they had shared for over 4 decades. Their children visited regularly, and her grandchildren called often from their respective colleges, but the house felt emptier than she had ever imagined possible. On the 23rd of September, exactly 50 years since the day a wounded American airman had been brought to the aid station in Langres, Marie was sorting through Daniel's papers in his study. Though she had gone through his professional documents soon after his death, she had left his personal files untouched, not yet ready to confront the memories they might contain. Among architectural drawings, correspondence with clients, and family photographs, Marie discovered a folder labeled simply Marie, 1944. Inside were her original letters from France, the sketch he had drawn of her in the aid station, and a journal she had never seen before. Opening it, she recognized Daniel's handwriting, smaller and neater than it had become in later years. The first entry was dated September 24, 1944. "I met someone today who I believe may have saved my life, not just through the blood she donated, though the medics say that certainly helped, but through a kind of grace that seems remarkable amid such destruction. Her name is Marie Dubois." Tears blurred Marie's vision as she read Daniel's contemporaneous account of their first meeting, his impressions of her, and his growing feelings during those few days in Langres. The journal continued through his recovery in England, his return to America, and the anxious months of waiting to learn if she would accept his proposal. The final entry, dated April 24th, 1946, simply stated, "She came, despite everything, the distance, the uncertainty, leaving behind all she knows. She came. I will spend the rest of my life ensuring she never regrets that decision." Marie closed the journal, holding it against her heart. In 50 years of marriage, Daniel had never shown her these writings, perhaps feeling they were too personal, or fearing they might seem sentimental. Yet they were a testament to a love that had begun in the unlikeliest circumstances and endured through all the challenges that followed. The doorbell rang, pulling Marie from her reverie. Setting aside the journal, she wiped her eyes and made her way to the front door. Through the sidelight window, she could see a young man in his 20s standing on the porch, shifting nervously from one foot to the other. He wasn't one of her neighbor's children, and he didn't appear to be selling anything. Curious, Marie opened the door. "Yes, can I help you?" The young man looked at her with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "Mrs. Gardner, Marie Dubois Gardner." "Yes, that's me," she confirmed, her French accent still detectable after all these years in America. He took a deep breath. "My name is Michael Hoffman. My grandfather was Colonel Werner Hoffman." Marie stared at him, the name immediately transporting her back to occupied Langres. "The German commander?" The young man nodded. "Yes, I've been researching my family history, trying to understand their role during the war. I found my grandfather's journals after my mother died last year." He hesitated. "Your name appears in them. Several times, actually." Marie's hand went to her throat in surprise. I don't understand. I was just a pharmacy apprentice. I had very little interaction with the German authorities." "May I come in?" Michael asked. "I have something I think you should see." Still bewildered, Marie stepped aside to let him enter, leading him to the living room where afternoon sunlight streamed through windows overlooking a garden Daniel had designed with both American and French plantings. Michael removed a leather-bound book from his backpack, handling it with care. "My grandfather wrote extensively during his time in Langres. He was meticulous about recording the daily operations of the occupation, but also his personal observations." He opened the journal to a marked page and handed it to Marie. The entry was dated July 1943, written in precise German script that Marie could still read from her wartime experience. "The resistance activity in the forest regions continues to frustrate our efforts. Today, we captured a young man from Langres, Henri Dubois, attempting to pass information to partisans near the Eastern Road. Standard protocol would demand immediate execution, but I find myself reluctant to order this. The boy is barely 20, and his defiance reminds me uncomfortably of my own son, now fighting on the Eastern Front. I have decided instead to have him transported to a labor camp in Germany. This is still a severe punishment, but it leaves open the possibility of survival. I told the boy's sister, Marie, of my decision when she came to headquarters pleading for information about her brother. The relief in her eyes was quickly masked, but it affected me more than I care to admit. She is the apprentice at Bouchard's pharmacy, where they have fairly distributed medications to German personnel and French civilians alike. Such small decencies should not go unnoted, even between enemies. Marie looked up from the journal, her hands trembling slightly. I remember going to the headquarters. I was terrified. Colonel Hoffman told me Henri had been sent to Germany, but he never mentioned. She couldn't finish the sentence. That he spared your brother's life, Michael completed gently. My grandfather wasn't supposed to do that. His orders were to execute captured resistance fighters immediately. Marie sat heavily on the sofa, memories flooding back. I never knew. All this time, I thought Henri was simply fortunate to be sent to labor rather than... She shook her head in disbelief. There's more, Michael said, turning to another marked page, from April 1944. This entry described the colonel's decision to leave medical supplies behind during the German retreat from Langres, supplies that would eventually be used to treat wounded Allied soldiers, including Daniel. The colonel had justified this militarily as lightening their load for faster withdrawal, but privately acknowledged a reluctance to strip the town of resources after what he called a relatively civilized occupation. My grandfather was not a saint, Michael said as Marie read. He participated in a brutal regime and followed most of his orders without question. But these journals show moments where his humanity occasionally broke through. I've been trying to understand how someone could be part of such a system while still maintaining these small pockets of decency. Marie closed the journal thoughtfully. During the occupation, we saw the German soldiers as a faceless enemy. It was easier that way. But occasionally, there were moments, a guard sharing his chocolate with children, an officer looking the other way when curfew was broken for a medical emergency, that reminded us they were men, not monsters. She looked directly at Michael. This doesn't excuse what Germany did, you understand? Of course not, he agreed quickly. I'm not seeking to apologize for or justify the occupation. I'm trying to understand the complexity of it all, how people can make both terrible and merciful choices in the same lifetime. Why did you come to me with this? Marie asked. Michael hesitated. 2 reasons. First, I thought you deserved to know about your brother, and second, he paused, seeming to gather courage, my grandfather's last journal entry, written shortly before his death in 1978, expressed regret for his role in the war, but also curiosity about what happened to certain people in Langres, including the pharmacy apprentice who had thanked him for sending her brother to Germany rather than having him shot. He remembered me after all those years. Marie was astonished. He remembered acts of dignity on both sides. Michael clarified. I think they helped him maintain some sense of his own humanity during a time when that was difficult. He looked around the room, noting the photographs of Marie's family, the subtle blend of American and French elements in the décor. I wanted to see how your life turned out. The girl my grandfather mentioned, who somehow remained courteous to the man controlling her occupied town. Marie was quiet for a long moment, processing this unexpected connection to her past. Finally, she stood. Would you like some tea, Mr. Hoffman? Or perhaps coffee? And then, if you're interested, I could tell you about what happened after the Americans came to Langres. Michael's tense expression relaxed into a grateful smile. I'd like that very much, Mrs. Gardner. As Marie went to the kitchen to put on the kettle, she glanced at the photograph of Daniel that sat on the counter, taken on their 40th anniversary, his eyes still bright with the same warmth she had first seen in the aid station. She touched the frame lightly, thinking of the journal she had discovered just before Michael's arrival, of Colonel Hoffman's unexpected act of mercy toward Henri, of all the invisible threads connecting lives across time and circumstance. Daniel, she whispered to the photograph, I'll never believe who just knocked on our door. Returning to the living room with a tray of tea and the French cookies she still baked using her grandmother's recipe, Marie settled in her favorite chair and began. It was September 23rd, 1944. The morning fog clung to the rolling hills around Langres like a protective blanket. Hours later, as the afternoon sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room, Marie finished recounting her life's journey, from the pharmacy in occupied France to this quiet home in Connecticut, from a young woman donating blood to a wounded soldier to a grandmother with half a century of American life behind her. Michael had listened intently, occasionally asking questions, but mostly allowing her story to unfold at its own pace. Now he sat back, visibly moved. It's extraordinary, he said finally. How lives intersect in ways we can never predict. My grandfather's decision about your brother led to your meeting Lieutenant Gardner, which led to your coming to America, which ultimately led to me sitting in your living room 70 years later. History is made of such connections, Marie agreed, though we rarely see them clearly in the moment. She hesitated, then added, Thank you for coming here today. You've given me answers to questions I didn't even know I still had. As Michael prepared to leave, he handed Marie a card with his contact information. I'm documenting these stories, not to excuse or glorify, but to understand. If you're willing, I'd like to include yours. Marie nodded. On one condition, that you emphasize this truth. Even in the darkest times, humanity persists, sometimes in grand gestures of heroism, but more often in small acts of decency that leave ripples we cannot foresee. After Michael had gone, Marie returned to Daniel's study and picked up his journal again. 50 years ago today, he had written about a French girl who had given her blood to save a stranger. That simple act had set in motion a lifetime of love, family, struggle, and joy, a journey across continents and decades that neither of them could have imagined as they sat side by side in that makeshift aid station. Outside, the maple trees were beginning to turn gold and crimson in the early autumn light. Marie opened the window, letting in the cool evening air, and thought of Langres, of Hartford, of all the places that had shaped her long life. She thought of Daniel, of her father and grandmother, of Henri, who had passed away 5 years earlier, and now, unexpectedly, of Colonel Hoffman, whose moment of humanity had altered the course of so many lives. We are all connected, she murmured, by threads we cannot see until time reveals the pattern they have woven. That night, Marie wrote a letter to her grandchildren, beginning with the same words she had spoken to Michael. It was September 23rd, 1944. The morning fog clung to the rolling hills around Langres like a protective blanket. She wrote long into the night, recording not just the facts of history, but the emotions that had accompanied them, the fear and hope of wartime, the uncertainty and excitement of coming to America, the joy and challenges of building a life in a new land. In the decades that followed her encounter with Michael Hoffman, Marie became an active participant in veterans groups, speaking about her experiences as both a civilian under occupation and a war bride. She contributed oral histories to several World War II archives, reconnected with other French war brides through newly established internet groups, and eventually published a memoir titled Blood and Lavender, From Langres to Hartford. When asked why she had waited so long to share her story publicly, Marie would smile and say, "Some experiences need to be lived with quietly before they can be spoken aloud. And sometimes it takes a knock on the door 50 years later to help you understand your own history." Marie Dubois Gardner lived to see the dawn of the new millennium, passing away peacefully in 2003 at the age of 79, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even 2 great-grandchildren. At her funeral, Michael Hoffman sat quietly at the back of the church, one of dozens whose lives had been touched by a woman who had once given her blood to a wounded soldier and, in doing so, began a journey that would connect generations across time and circumstance. On her headstone, beneath her name and the years that marked her life, was inscribed a line from the last page of her memoir. "We are defined not by the conflicts that divide us, but by the compassion that unites us across all boundaries of time and place." And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.